Welcome to Between the Cracks. My name is Dart.
And I'm Derek from One River Tea.
Yeah, and today we have a few things we're going to talk about. Derek is going to Japan in just over a month, so we're going to talk about some tea bowls. We have one of the biggest video games that's ever been released. I think one of the biggest media pieces ever internationally from China, and trying to make tea content, slow tea content.
Yeah, I didn't realize I'm going to Japan that soon. I
It's
bought
like a
my
month and
tickets.
2 days.
Yeah, I bought my tickets and everything, and I've just been way too busy with other things to really stop and think about it. Oh man.
Which also means Northwest Tea Fest is 3 days less than that. So
Oh, wow.
I'll be in Seattle a month from today for the Northwest Tea Festival.
That's pretty cool because I feel like it was the contacts you made in the Northwest Tea Festival that actually saw me out getting into Japan. Isn't that right?
Yeah. I mean, so Jonathan Steele, he was teaching ceramics in university and was off social media. He actually deleted his Instagram account. And last year, probably June, maybe May, somewhere in that time frame, he followed me from a reel that I posted. And the only reason that I noticed was because Mark had mentioned him. I don't typically know, like, I don't know people's names for the most part on Instagram. Like when we get a new follower, a lot of times I don't know, but it was just like Mark had mentioned him. We had connected. He had followed me on Instagram. I reached out to him, and we did Portland and Northwest Tea Fest both together last year.
Nice. And so why is that relevant for me going to Japan, right? Like this Northwest Tea Fest ceramicist and then me based in China.
So Jonathan had this opportunity to go to a residency in Shigaraki, one of the biggest ceramics places in Japan. And when we realized when he was going to be going, right after Northwest Tea Fest, we realized it was at the exact same time as Chinese National Week. So there's this ceramics festival in Shigaraki the same week that Derek has off every single year, and Jonathan will be flying into Shigaraki. Talk about some UM right there.
Yeah, just perfect timing lining up. And we've always been talking about how we want to get more into, just the Japanese porcelain at some point, the Japanese ceramics, because, Zhang Yin Chao, right, who makes this pot, who makes all of these like really nice, beautifully shaped Chaozhou pieces with soul.
By the way,
sorry, sneak preview.
Name for that? I think we should name it after Sun Wukong's gourd.
Oh, that does look like the gourd. I was thinking about that today when I was drinking out of it. I was like, oh, it's like the medicine gourd.
Yeah, we gotta talk. We'll talk about that later too.
but yeah, Zhang Yin Chao, he's enamored with Japanese pottery. He's like the Japanese ceramicists. They know how to make soul pieces with soul in it. In China, we talked about this previously. China, they always want to make things that are perfect. This is like the Wang Peixin. Wang Peixin, like his pieces are so beautiful and refined. You spend so much time making it look perfect, it almost like doesn't even look handmade.
Yeah, like this one, people would ask me about. This is the Fireball, right? One of his dragon eggs. This is the first dragon egg we carried because a lot of them, they don't look as good. It kind of almost looks like it's machine made just because it's so meticulously, like, perfectly made.
Too perfect, yeah. And so that'll be interesting to see, to get out to Japan and then kind of see what it's like, because this is like the tokoname heart, right? The heart of tokoname.
Yeah, so they have like tokoname, they have bizenware, they have the bunchong, which was like the Korean potters in Japan. That's like Mark's tea bowls. That's like the bunchong ware, which was Korean influence, but still like Korea, Japan, with like the white slip and the shino glazes. That's all Japan.
So cool. Yeah, I mean, there's so much out there that we've really just stuck with Chinese pottery for so long, and of course I don't regret it. I love getting so deep into what we do get into, but
for sure,
when it falls into your lap like this, might as well check it out.
And this bowl is from Andrew Sartorius. So he runs a studio in New York. And I don't know if you saw the reel this morning, but it was about how this is a sculptural tea bowl. And basically the idea that he mentioned to me was how a lot of times, it's funny because most of these potters, they have potters that they look up to and work that they want to buy. But the really good potters who are young are already looking at people's pots who are thousands of dollars, right? Sculptures that are thousands of dollars. And so he mentioned how, a sculptural tea bowl is a way for you to get a small piece of a sculpture that you could afford, because a full sculpture of an artist that you really like, you might not be able to. But I'm just excited to really get more into matcha. I feel like it's just going to give me more of an excuse. Like once we get some chawans, like I feel like that's just going to give me an excuse to drink some more matcha.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see like what the tea bowls in Japan really look like. I feel like they're
Mm,
not maybe they're not going to be as extreme as pushing the envelope as a sculptural tea bowl. But at the
mm.
same time, I feel like they could be very wabi sabi, could be very natural. You'll be able to find a lot of pieces with soul in it.
Yeah, I've seen some like some Japanese artists like that are back here in the States, like in North Carolina. There's Akira, and his work is very like it's still the kind of typical round shape of a tea bowl, but it's chunky, where it's like it
Okay.
looks like there's like giant, not paint, but like clay that's like pulled down the side and pushed up the side, and so it's not. It does kind of have this like wabi sabi feel. It's not obviously, yeah, not as drastic as this, but still much more varied than we'd see in any Chinese pottery.
Yeah, we mentioned wabi sabi, and we
Mm,
mentioned like the idea that sometimes Chinese pottery wants to be, almost like ideally perfect, pristine.
yeah.
I feel like this is a interesting dig into their different kind of cultural aesthetics, like as far as
Hmm.
art goes. A lot of art forms, a lot of time, this is like soft power, like what gets exported to the rest of the world. If it's
Yeah.
video games, movies, music, yeah, cartoons, anime, whatever. A
Yeah.
lot of recent times, it seems like China has not had a lot of good exports, or not a whole lot of exports. While
Their media is
Japan,
really bad. Like
yeah, I mean, the
historically,
TV
this
shows.
yeah, this TV shows, the movie, they're just low budget. Like it's low production. Like it looks like something that we would have done 50 years ago. They were doing 10 years ago.
But then there's also a lot of pressure to make something that fits the moral standards of what China wants.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
in a lot of the movies, you have good guys that are absolutely perfectly good. You have bad
Yeah.
guys that are really, really bad. And
Right.
there's no gray. There's no in between. There's no
Yeah.
like, well, this bad guy has a little bit of good in him. Like, no, no, bad guys are bad. Good guys are good.
And then you have like the fact that like I think people forget. My dad talks about this a lot. Like when I mention like speaking Chinese now, and he's like, when we were when I was younger, right? When we were watching movies that were subbed martial arts movies, we didn't have access to China. Like China was still very much cut off from the Western world. Like all of our media that we got from China was through Hong Kong at that point. Like the rest of mainland China wasn't really sharing with the Western world, whereas like Japan, we were getting everything from them, right? I mean, like our kids are growing up on Japanese video games, on Japanese video game consoles and anime and things like that, whereas China very much hasn't shared with the rest of the world as much.
Which is, it's I almost want to say like historically unprecedented, because before they were like the dominant power in like Southeast Asia, and like a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff that gets pushed to other cultures in this region either comes through China or comes from China.
Right,
And
right.
then all of a sudden you just get this disconnect. This is like, when the Westerners come in, China gets shook up and then just closes all the borders.
Yeah.
And now it's like maybe with this is what we're getting into, is the Song Wukong video game. Like this is
Hmm.
one of the first expressions of Chinese soft power, like really cool art, cool
So good.
mythology, really interesting play
Yeah.
being exported to the rest of the world. Where before it
Yeah.
was, primarily dominated by Japanese video
Hmm.
games, right? I was just playing Elden Ring, right? And
Hmm.
Elden Ring is a really nice like Japanese video game, beautiful art style.
I didn't even know Elden Ring is Japanese. I'm not gonna lie.
It's what's his name, Miyazaki.
Oh, okay,
Miyazaki
okay.
did all of the Dark Souls. This Song Wukong video game is very similar in my mind to Elden Ring,
Hmm.
but you see the different artistic expressions to it.
Yeah. So by the way, I did get it. I caved. I was just talking about 3 days ago. It's like I don't have it yet. I don't have it yet. I'm like I'm gonna get it. So I got it. I hate it. Not I don't like Souls games. I don't like hard video games. The only reason I'm playing it is for the story, which is makes one of those games very hard to play. I don't actually hate it. It's beautiful. I'm very excited about it. And there's so many conversations I've already had with people of like not knowing who Wukong is. And somebody actually on Instagram messaged me and was like, "Hey, did you realize that Goku is literally a rip of Sun Wukong? He's a monkey boy who flies on a cloud and he has a staff."
And you're like, amazing.
Yeah, my mind was just like,
Yeah, just this kind of like expression that this exporting, like it's picked up by other cultures, this
yeah.
redone in different myths.
Mm.
So I actually caved as well, and I caved a little harder because that involved a PS5 as well.
It's
But
okay.
it
I did
was
it for a Star Wars game.
yeah, I've had the PS4 for over 10 years now, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
was using the PS4 until like they stopped making games for both systems, right? And so
Mhm.
like
And
previously
they
all
still
the
do.
right, but it's like this
Yeah,
is one of the first games that's only for PS5. It's not for PS4. And
yeah,
so I was like, yeah, it's about time. It's about time.
yeah.
Because I just came from playing, like the Souls game and playing,
Mhm.
probably a lot of Japanese video games like Zelda and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And while we talked about the wabi sabi nature of it, there's still a level of beauty, of pristine, like I don't know. In the Japanese video games, it does seem like there is this level of meticulous beauty, where in the Chinese video game, especially in the song Wukong, you get a lot more of this rustic, natural, Taoist elements.
It's good. Like it's really good. Like there are moments where it feels like being back in a temple in China, being back on a mountain. Like I realize for most people they probably haven't been in that situation before, but the fact that I'm like getting these very reminiscent echoes of like actually being there, like sitting down. The fact that like one of the ways that you get sparks is you sit down and you do like a meditation session. Like that's so. It's just so different.
I mean that reminds me a little bit of like Ghost of Tsushima. I think that's what it is.
Mm.
It's the Japanese samurai game, and you sit down, you meditate, and you write
Oh,
haiku.
do you?
You write
Okay,
little
okay.
poems and
Cool.
stuff, and then you get experience for that. You get
Yeah,
more vigor, whatever.
cool.
But I feel like there's another element here where it is distinctly Chinese,
Mhm.
which I'm just absolutely loving. Like you said, it feels. This is the weirdest thing for me. It's like, yeah, it's beautiful, but it feels like I places I've been to here in China.
Yeah.
It feels
Yeah.
like I'm walking through, an old side of the mountain on a bamboo forest, and like seeing temples that are abandoned,
Yep.
and just
Eh,
this
yeah.
depth of history that it's wild. It's so cool. So
Yeah.
the Huaguo Mountain is
Mhm.
in the Lianyangguang, which is the coastal town of Jiangsu.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of friends who are actually from the city, from that
Mhm.
area, and it's just like a few hours from Yangzhou. It's like the heart of this game.
And you sent me that post this morning about like the 30 different places like that were all like if you look they're so close to being accurate with what it actually looks like in real life, which is also really cool. Like I think we've talked about that a couple times of trying to do something like that with a piece of art on a piece of teaware or something like that. But it's really hard to do it accurately and make it interesting. And I think they're doing a really good job of doing both, where if you don't know what's going on, it's just like, whoa, there's this cool thing. But if you do, there's so many Easter eggs.
Have you looked at the bestiary? Like when you see all the different characters, and you go into like the menu, and you can
Mhm.
see like here's a woodblock print of like
Yeah.
the yeah of the different like ghosts and the spirits and stuff like that, and a huge description about it.
I thought it was cool that like they start as sketches and then they turn into pages like once you get more information. Did you notice that?
I
Yeah,
did
it was
not, but
cool.
that's
It's
I can see it building up, and that's actually one of the Chinese classics, right? So there's the Journey to the West is one of the classics. You have the
yeah.
Dream of the Red Chamber, Romance of the Three Kingdoms. You have the Water Margin, and
Mhm.
then you have the Mountains and Rivers, and it's
Mhm.
essentially this mythical bestiary of all of the different spirits and all of the strange creatures that potentially live throughout China. And the structure of it is you have the sketching of it, and then you have the description of it, and so like you're essentially building another
Mm.
mythic book in within the game.
That's
It's
cool. I
so
didn't know
cool.
about the fifth one. I knew about the other four, and I've read two of them. I did not know about the fifth one though.
So you've read the Journey to the West?
I read it in a graded reader Chinese one. So it was like a 2,000 character graded reader. So it probably wasn't the full depth, but at the same time, I think there were some things that was like just immediately deeper because I was reading them in Chinese. But when I was reading it and talking to Chinese people, it was funny because some of them were like, oh, yeah, yeah, Sun Wukong, Sun Wukong. And then like I'd say one of the things, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like your art, it's more than with some things. I mean, obviously they're not, haven't just read it.
Video games kind of wild, because when you start out, you're essentially just fighting the gods of heaven, right?
Yeah.
And so you're essentially immediately an anti-hero. That's what it
Right.
feels like. You're
Yeah. I mean,
renouncing immortality. You're
yeah.
trying to take down all of the gods. Like
Yeah.
it's really irreverent.
Some people, it's funny because people were comparing him to Kratos. Like I've seen people online comparing him to Kratos. Is interesting, but I think Kratos is more like I have a vendetta against the big guy, you know? Like, whereas like, I feel like Sun Wukong, it is like all of godhood has failed, right? All of immortal, like they're all corrupt. Like his whole like MO, and he is mischievous, right? Like it's not completely pure. But when I saw someone mention that, I was thinking I would have liked it better if it was like the new God of War games rather than a Souls game. Because when you
Oh, okay.
feel like Kratos, it feels like you're a god. In the Souls games, it feels like you're getting beaten down by gods until you're good enough to like finally like, okay, I got through it.
I don't know, man. Like if this is China's first big video game to the West, I'm happy it's not this like call in. It's just about the mythology. It's just about the art. Like the video gameplay, it's like whatever. It's beautiful. Don't care about it.
Mhm.
The fact that they can make a beautiful video game, that's also very challenging. I think that's a really good work of art.
I don't know if that needs the difficulty to do that, but I think it's a
Oh,
fantastic game.
somebody
I just,
somebody's gotten beat down a few times, huh?
yeah, what chapter are you on, bud? I'm on
I've just
chapter
played an hour.
two.
I invited Luke over today. He's gonna help me beat it. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
fair enough.
He
Fair
does
enough.
kung fu.
So, so that was actually really cool too. One of the first staff moves that Wukong does in the game was one of the first forms that I learned when I was doing Shaolin Kung Fu with Master Jin, hanging out with Luke. And so that was one of the cool things too, is like even the Kung Fu is accurate and like the poses that they finish on and the very like I was just fighting the
Yao
Black
Guai.
Wind King.
Oh.
Yeah, they're all Yaguais, yeah. The Black Wind King, but like his like finishing like push, palm push is like it's like such a Chinese like iconic martial art thing that I was just like, oh yeah, reminded me
Yeah,
of a
no,
form.
I love like the martial arts elements in it, where it's just like you
Yeah.
can the controls for it, the walking, the running. You can stalk an enemy. You can do
Hmm.
that circle. You
Hmm.
guys both circle each other. You kind of wait, and then you just like you jump in there, and you both start attacking each other. It's so well done.
The staff twirl.
Oh yeah,
It is so hard to do a staff twirl and not destroy your shins and your arms like when you're doing it. And you actually usually like when you're starting, at least when I was starting, you would use your second arm to guide it. And so when he's just like casually like flipping it around like in front of him and behind him, like that is so ridiculously hard and no one realizes that, but
no,
it's very cool.
I'm a huge fan of it, but we can't just talk about Song Wukong.
You're right. You're right. But we can, oh yes we can. But we just have
Okay.
to pivot. So this is the time of the year where we're doing our end of year review, right? Where like Derek and I are looking at okay, what Teaware did we sell? What Teaware do we want to get from next year? What studios do we want to go back to? How are we going to change what we're offering? How are we going to keep what we're offering? And one of the things that Derek and I are both talking about is we're both into Chinese history, mythology, right? On different ends of it. Derek, why don't you tell a little bit about your background? Because I don't think we've really talked about it on the podcast in terms of like your undergrad and like some of your background with Chinese history.
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny because I tell people, I went to university for 7 years, but it was all undergrad, just because I kept switching my major. Right, I did I did English for poetry, I did psychology, I did anthropology, I did a little bit of philosophy, history. I went back to education, and then eventually I settled down in East Asian languages and cultures with an emphasis in Chinese, because within that I got poetry, I got history, I got philosophy, I got mythology, I got so many. It's great anthropology as well. And so for me, like that is my bread and butter, like the history, the mythology, the way ideologies can shape a culture and the culture shapes reality. Like
Yeah.
this is my bread and butter.
And it was so cool. So I actually went back and I was like, you know how to play this game really authentically? I'm going to sit down, I'm going to drink tea, I'm going to play the game. And I went back and started listening to Tea Soup from the beginning, where you do
Oh,
that brief history, right? Going through. And it's interesting because Rachel and I were talking about after playing for a little bit how in China they have a long enough history that they're like their mythology still affects present day, right? Like still
yeah.
affects like the marketing and goods that are sold, still affects like the way that people think about like which gods are interesting, which god, and it's not just history. It's like history and mythology like woven together in a way that I feel like most other cultures aren't like. Maybe they are, but definitely in the U.S. I mean, we're not old enough to have a culture like that.
Even in England, like
Mm,
England's history has this like deep like cut, this severing from like
yeah,
the Norman invasion, like the 1000s, and then all of a sudden like you don't have history beyond that. You just have
yeah,
like middle age history, like the Knights of the Round Table,
yeah,
dragons and stuff like that, but you
yeah.
can't get older.
Right,
With China, it goes back to Shen Nong, which is
right.
like antiquity, like ancient history. And so I was doing a
Yeah.
reel today about the Grandmother Mountain, where that's the second episode of Tea Soup, where I talk about the history of white tea, and there's so much more to be said and like pulled out of it. But in a reel, you can only say so much.
Yeah, this is the cake that he's talking about, and this is the art that he was referring to. But yeah, it is interesting because like China's one of the only countries, at least again, that I've been exposed to that tries to like present this contiguous history, like from the origin of life, the origin of tea, the origin of this like, okay, we can qualify all of it or quantify all of it, where other cultures they seem to sever, yeah, like the ancient or the antiquity from, the modern or the historic.
Yeah, no, I think that is really interesting, especially living through this epoch of Chinese history where
Mm-hmm.
they are trying to separate, right? With like the revolutions in the past and stuff like that, and trying to get unshackle themselves from tradition, which, if you have 5,000 years of tradition, it really weighs heavy on you.
But it's also interesting because like when you look at the modern architecture in China, there's a lot of emphasis, and it's more than just like our 80s nostalgia that we like to claim with like having retro stuff, right? It's We're talking about like recreating things that are 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, or perceived to have been, right? But it looks so like I was talking with somebody about Slender Westlake, and they were telling me how they import birds that are not native to the area just to make it look more legitimate, like just to make it like fit the feeling and the vibe. It's an amazing, beautiful park, but it's like the amount of effort that they went through to do that is crazy.
Yeah, no, I think that is a huge, yeah, boon of living in China. Is like these kind of
Hmm.
beautiful gardens, because also like the other cities, they're competing against each other. You have a
Hmm.
very strong government that is giving funds, subsidizing
Hmm.
these things, and then you have other cities where it's like, oh, check out this garden. This
Yeah.
Suzhou's humble administrator garden is going to be way better than Slender West Lake. And then it's like, oh yeah, like we're importing birds.
Which is funny because like I remember my dad talking about like the US national park system and how like we haven't really invested much more money since when it started. Like, and it's just interesting because like we don't really put a modern emphasis like on developing some of these like extra social like beneficial areas for community, I guess. I don't know how better to qualify that, but yeah, whereas like there's literally competition for funding to like have better communal areas and parks and places to be, which is just, it's just so different.
Yeah, I think going back to Song Wukong, there's a funny line where like the ginger guy is like, "Oh, like the Guanyin temple, it burnt down and then was
Hmm.
rebuilt," and then he has this like weird saying where it's like, "If the temple burns down, is it even worth rebuilding?"
Mm.
Which is funny just because like all of the temples here in China have burnt down once or twice
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
have
for
been
sure.
and have
Yeah.
been rebuilt.
Right, right. Well, and that's the funny thing too, right? Like when you go to the temples and you see, and you're like, "Wow, this is amazing." It's like, yeah, it's only 30 years old. Like
Right.
it looks like it's supposed to be 1,000, and they went through the or 500 or whatever. But it's like, yeah, no, no, this was like made when my dad was a kid, or like,
Yeah, like the Daming temple was rebuilt in like, 2011 from like funds from Japan, right? Because the Daming
yeah.
Temple is actually that place where it's like, was it Zhenjian? The monk went from China to Japan to deliver the
Hmm.
sutras. And he tried
Hmm.
7 times. That was from Yangzhou
Hmm.
all the way to Japan. And so this temple has a lot of significance here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jiangsu, baby. It's got a lot of history.
Yeah, a lot of money, a lot of history, a lot of cool things developing. But we got sidetracked again. So the cool thing is because it's our year in review, we were talking about it, and one thing that we want to see in some of our custom work for next year is incorporating back in some of this history and mythology into some of our teaware. But admittedly, we realized we'll probably have to design it ourselves because there's not a huge market for it in China, other than like some very general things or like very, very expensive teaware that would be like, over $300 per piece, which I think if we're trying to share with more people, that's probably not the way to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, because we have like some mythic beasts. Do we still have those pots? The
Yeah, they're
four
still sitting.
Qingzhou
Yeah.
pots?
Yep, I
Yeah.
still have. Yep, they're still. Yep, haven't
But
listed them.
they're not cheap. Yeah. One thing I was doing that reel today or
Hmm.
yesterday actually, and part of it is Taimushan. And so I
Hmm.
was going through. I've been to Taimushan I think 3 times. This is
Hmm.
that mountain in Fujian,
Hmm.
and I was looking at the first time I went there, and I'm just blown away by the
Hmm.
beauty. It's a Taoist kind of feeling mountain. It's
Hmm.
really rough. It's really wild. You have paths that just like go through boulders that are like that thin, and you just have to
Hmm.
squeeze through them. And like the whole time I have videos where I'm just like, I'm not even sure I'm going the right way. I haven't seen anybody in the past 2 hours. Like I can hear people, but I can't see them. They must be like somewhere in this cave. And it has that feeling of like, yeah, oh wait, am I going back to Song Wukong? It has the feeling like you're playing Song Wukong. But anyways, like when you're out in those places, you're kind of having to. I took a lot of videos and pictures, thankfully. The problem is like Alex, my partner for One River Tea, like he gets out into some really beautiful wild places, but he just
Hmm.
doesn't have the artistic eye. And then he doesn't
Hmm.
take any photos of it. And then
Hmm.
I have a difficult time explaining to people, showing
Hmm.
other people in like social media what he's getting up to, because the only
Yeah.
picture I have is a blurry picture he took from like a raft that's going across a river.
Yeah, fair enough. Spoon's got a lot of talents. Photography just isn't on the list.
Yep. So it gets back into like, yeah, like how can you create the content you really want, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I was actually so today I did a reel and I wanted to capture this kind of like slow feeling reel. And it's funny because after I posted it, I was like, man, I don't like it. Like I'm just like, it's not slow. The whole purpose, like I really wanted like a slow tea session. And it had some cool shots, but the more that I do this, like making videos, the more that I realize it is really, really, really hard to make something that's good that is different than what the fast editing. Like the more that you want people to be able to see it and still like convey the idea and the feeling, right? That's really the goal, right? Of having it be slower is like I don't want your tea experience to feel like it's because it's not, right? It does have this slow feeling. And I got a ton of really good feedback on it, which made me feel good. But it's just so hard. I still can't in the reels create this like good flow for a really slow tea experience that feels intentional. Because I think there's plenty of tea content where people just like one cut, they go through the full session, but it doesn't evoke that feeling, right? It doesn't bring someone else into that space. And that's something that I feel like I've been having trouble with. And I just this morning I was like, oh, man, I wish I could have brought someone in closer, slower. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's going against the modern grind, right? Like the modern
yeah,
grind is those fast edits. It's when you cut out every single breath you take so that like the podcast or the reel just sounds like you're instantly talking the entire time, no break, no break, no break. And then to have one that's just all pauses, all slow down. Yeah,
yeah.
it's difficult. How do you captivate people with that?
I gotta share, and for any of you guys watching who want some more slow content, Life of Riza is a really good one. She's blown up, I think, in the last year or two, but like she does some really cool like cinematic vlog. But there's also some slow spaces in there. Jake Frew, most of the ones that I know that do slow stuff are also like filmmaking. So I think like having someone who has the filmmaking like experience or like interest in another field. I haven't seen too much of it yet, but I'm inspired, hopeful because they're doing well. They're doing it as full-time YouTubers with a slower editing style. Like I think there are people who appreciate it. It just has to be done really well to make it worthwhile.
One good thing I saw was like I think the director of Dune, he was talking about
Mm.
how you can do these like visual montages with motion, with
Mm-hmm.
sound. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like your cuts are more influenced by the motion of things. There's this rhythm that you can pick up on kind of on an intuitive level rather
Mm-hmm.
than this like half a second, half a second, half a second
Mm-hmm.
every time. And so I think like that kind of editing style. I'm thinking of Li Ziqi. Have you ever heard of Li Ziqi?
I think so.
She was really big like 5-10 years ago. She was like a Chinese video maker
Hmm.
out in Sichuan. And
Okay.
she initially, when she first started, she was doing all of the shots herself.
Hmm.
And she would just set up a camera and then just like walk into the woods and then set up another camera. And then she's harvesting like cotton. And then she
Hmm.
brings it back and she's like separating it all, drying it out, washing it all. And she
Hmm.
has this kind of slow, visceral feeling like you're actually there. At the very end, she like made a coat. And you're like, oh,
Hmm.
that's what she was doing for the past like 10 minutes.
Is she in Yunnan? Is she like that Yunnan tea
Yeah, I
girl?
think I
Is
think
that
it's
her?
Sichuan Yunnan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I have seen her then, because I have seen something I feel like what you were just talking about, but I didn't know her name. But I think controlling speed is really important. That's one thing that's really hard, I think, to convey to people. Like you just need experience doing it. Like for example, some of the stop motion stuff that I do, where I'm like cycling through a bunch of pots. I'll do like, let's say there's 10 things, like 10 pots that I want to showcase. If you cycle them all at the same speed, your brain is kind of just like, what's going on? So like
Mhm.
I'll do like 10 pots at 1 frame, 10 pots at 2 frames, 4 frames, 8 frames, 16 frames. And so you double it each time, but then you have to take away some of the pots in order to like not have it be too long. So I think that's just something that's just going to come with more practice and more time. But yeah, controlling speed is so important for like for storytelling.
Thing that I struggle with, like controlling the speed, slowing stuff down, and storytelling, my delivery of speech. Right,
Mm,
like I think we've done a good job of eliminating the and
yeah.
so there is now where we would fill the gap,
Mhm.
the silence of us stopping and thinking about it.
Yeah.
However, like you don't want to listen to a reel you made or listen to a video you made or a podcast and you're like, I sound sedated. I sound like I'm about to fall asleep. Like, is this going to keep people's attention at all? Like,
Yeah.
and so you have to get this like this balance of like
Hmm.
it's chill, it's slow, but it's exciting, it's
Hmm.
captivating, it's interesting.
I feel like I've gotten better at that. I don't know if it's still probably sometimes maybe a little bit too much, but yeah, I think it just, I think Instagram just sent me a message. I'm like 10 reels away from 300. It's like, yeah, it just takes practice.
That's a
Yeah, there's
lot,
no,
yeah. A
yeah.
lot of reels.
All right, buddy. You got anything else for today?
That's about it for today. I'm
Cool.
gonna play some Song Wukong later. Did we talk about Song
Lu-
Wukong enough?
yeah, maybe we'll talk about it next week too. Lulu, my daughter, made me promise not to play any of chapter 2 until she woke up in the morning.
Oh
So I
really?
can't go
That's
play any
cool.
Swim Wukong. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
it's a visually pleasant game to watch as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like not super violent. Like there's no blood.
Right.
It's not bloody, which is kind of, I mean, obviously like you're fighting people, but like they fade away into existence. Like it's very, even for being as violent of a game or other games like it that are super violent, like it's not as much. So anyway, okay,
Yeah.
we'll catch you guys next time.